Good.
Talking 3 versus 20 and something.
So it's your shoulder.
I don't know the answer. I'm guessing that there's an aggregate comparison as opposed to an individual.
I think I have no
Well, one
patience.
said, I believe it says 17. Who put that together?
All right.
Did CDM put those questions together?
I was gonna see if you could hear us.
The questions and answers. We haven't met. Every time I see that name, I think of the former reporter who now works for Davenport Companies.
Oh, really?
He's always been the Matt Pitt.
Can you guys hear us? Anyone in Zoom?
Yes, we can.
Yay.
Yeah. Good.
All right. All right, we're good. 401. Nice.
Who else is on there? It's Mary Craig. Sometimes she calls in.
Let's see her. I have 7 participants. Oh, there we go.
No, she's not on there. Okay.
So Dave, can you explain those informational sessions again? Who was involved in those? So those aren't the 3 listening sessions, then they were different?
Yes, DEP sent out a notice. I'm not sure where it was sent to or what the full distribution was, but they held 2 informational sessions just to describe and go through what the regulations were, what the intent of the modifications to Title V and the watershed permit were intended to achieve. And then they opened it up to comments and questions after those information sessions. And they were different than the 3 community meetings, which they held 2 last week and the 3rd one was tonight. So we had people on those calls and we summarized questions raised and the answers provided by DEP at those sessions. Because I thought it would be helpful.
No, I think it's very helpful. Because I was reading through them this afternoon for a little while, and it covers a bunch of things. Well, we'll talk about the meeting. It covered almost everything, but like I said, they seem to be making our point that their expectations are a little bit too ambitious.
I would agree. I thought the question and answer summary was very good. A lot of questions I had brought up and we had brought up when they met with us in the fall here, and there was still some questions that he didn't seem to have the answers for. That's all. Effectiveness of Title V, what we call IA, what we call it on to the town. I skimmed through it quickly. I'd have to circle it again, but I know there's going to be costs. Monitoring it, how it was going to be monitored, who's going to pay for it, the cost of the towns, how long it was going to. Yeah, how long it was going to take for projections to go forward in the Sentinel. This call on Title V.
Should I pull up CDM stuff
DEP is
right
not
now?
concerned about the cost. That's pretty
No,
honest.
not
No, wait,
Yeah.
okay.
But they said they have technical and other help, whatever that means.
Under probably item number 2.
All right, we have enough for a quorum, so.
This is a bonanza for DEP. It's going to grow twice the size of it.
Can you guys do a roll call for me? Sorry, it's been
Yes,
a
we're
while.
going to.
Thank you.
We only have 4 that I can see, and Joanne did say 4:30 and on Burke and Holtzman. Oh, George is in Boston for some personal reasons. You have a note for being late?
I do.
Coming from the principal's office.
I'll take the roll call. Obviously myself, I'm here. Mary Craig?
Here.
Okay, Spiro.
Aye.
John DeLuzo.
Yeah.
I believe that's all we have for committee members right now. So with that, I'll open the meeting for the OPM update.
Right, I passed out a brief progress report. We had 2 major deliverables this past month from the design team with CDM Smith. On November 29th, they submitted the 30% design and preliminary design report for the water resource reclamation facility. And then on November 30th, they submitted the 60% design for the collection system contracts 2 and 3. So our next major meeting is on December 14th. We'll be having a 30% design workshop at Public Works where CDM Smith will be going over the design package. And we'll be participating in any reviews or comments that we have, as well as we're in the process of reviewing the 60% design submission for the collection system. One thing that they was not included in either package that CDM is still working on are the opinions of probable cost for both projects. So I was in touch with both Mike and Bill and Matt today, and they said those are in the works and they'll be coming shortly. Other than that, there was a site visit held at the Chatham wastewater treatment plant on December 1st. To visit the plant's continuous backwash denitrification filters, which are very similar to what's being proposed for the new plant here. And I'll defer to the regulatory updates until we get later down in the agenda, Mr. Chairman. One item that they did also receive was a confirmation from the Cape Cod Commission on the 208 consistency review. That was forwarded to Mass DEP to indicate that as part of the intended use plan, which is going to be developed in early January, that the plans that were submitted as part of the notice of project change is consistent with the 208 plan that the Cape Cod Commission has on file.
So they've already determined that it is consistent. Because that letter was kind of confusing, and it sounded like, yeah, we're reviewing it, but. So we're good with the commission.
The letter specifically said it was still under review, however, for the purposes of the SRF project, the project was consistent with the regs. So that's really all you needed for DEP's purposes, but whether we get comments back from Cape Cod.
It didn't sound like a very clear
It was,
statement. that was made.
It's really meant more towards
I
SRF.
think it was
Yeah,
specifically.
Well, that's
targeted.
good, because obviously we need that to move
Exactly.
forward.
It was for an internal check mark.
Got it. Okay.
Keep that in, it looks good, and continue to review. That was the message.
So design update, you kind of just covered that, right? The reason I wanted to talk about the collection system is something struck, well, a couple of things that hit me, and one is the way that the flows on Route 28 in South Yarmouth are split. If you're not really paying attention, you're not gonna pick that up where it goes two different directions and then down to things through Old Main Street. And how do we support a 30-inch main on Old Main Street with the flows that we're gonna start with?
Do you want me to open your,
If you could.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Looking at it, seeing.
I don't want
You
to,
might have to share that, right?
I thought I could just.
I'm sorry, Laura, it was the last
If
minute.
you go back to Zoom.
That's okay.
Share screen.
Maybe while waiting, that, so Kurt, specific question, was it just in terms of where the,
There's-
Somebody mentioned a 30-inch main on Old Main Street.
Sure.
Thank
Which, you know, being a plumber, you could have not enough flow to support the size of the pipe.
correct?
Yeah.
So my concern is,
Mouse is jumping.
I guess a couple things. So from Bass River Bridge to Four Corners, where does that flow go? What's gonna support the flow
Goodness gracious.
on Old Main Street until it gets, is it Pond Street that picks up the 28 flow?
A portion of 28 goes down Pond Street, correct,
Okay.
from both directions.
So from Pond Street, say to the cultural center area, what flow supports
This one?
that main? Because that's 30 inches to pick up upper Bass River, correct?
Again, yes, correct, you're correct. In the future, obviously, it's needed to carry the flow from these future phases in build out once we're beyond phase one. So there is a 30-inch pipe in Old Main Street from the North Route 28 intersection down to the pumping station down near Pancake Man, that'll pump over to the plant. But you're right, under the early phases, there isn't going to be a lot of flow in that pipe. So that might require some more maintenance on the town's part during the initial years when there's only, only the flows that are connected directly to it along Old Main are going to be flowing through it. And as you said, a portion of 28 is coming down Pond Street, a few side streets along the way. But, it's just a maintenance issue. Periodically, it'll have to be flushed just to make sure we're getting the solids moving down toward the pumping station. But it's the nature of the beast. When you're building, a large system like this, you have to start at the lower end, obviously, and then until the future connections come to give you that flushing velocity that you need on a daily basis, it's going to have to be, done by, in terms of maintenance on the town's part.
So, again, so you know what Bridge Street is? That's the continuation of 28 from the lights to the bridge. That's
Yep.
actually called Bridge Street.
Correct. Yep.
Where does that flow go?
That
Can I go
goes.
down Old Main or just keep going down 28?
That goes down Old Main.
Okay.
And then the lower part of 28 heads toward the intersection of Old Main as well. So there's a break point pretty much where the end of the blue is. So whatever is in the blue, which designates part of the MassDOT intersection project, that's coming toward the intersection. I believe we extended a little bit further under contract 2, but the rest of it from that point will go down Pond Street. So a portion of 28 heads back toward the intersection, a portion heads in the other direction toward Pond Street. There's only a few connections in that little stretch on
Well, that's
28,
my
because you hit the
concern.
top of the hill.
And you get low use users.
Yeah.
Mostly residential. The other ones are sporadic.
Yeah.
The church, cultural center, those only get used occasionally.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be constantly.
You're right. Like I said, it's just the nature of building out a system like this. The only other option would have been to put a smaller pipe in initially and then replace it in the future. And that has a
doesn't
whole
make sense.
host of other issues associated with that as well. So it's really, there's not a lot of ways to handle that. But you're right. It's something you have to keep an eye on during the initial years and flush it periodically just to make sure you're not
Can
getting
you
any
put
blockages.
stormwater on a short-term basis in it?
No.
Contaminates,
What's that?
will contaminate the system,
This is designed just for sanitary sewer. DEP won't let you do that.
not even on a temporary basis, a problem like this.
No.
I don't, anybody else have any other questions?
No, it's a great question, and
It's
I'm
big enough,
happy.
you can make it part of the water slide from.
Yeah, it's big enough that you could fit some kids in there.
Put your wetsuit on, down the pipe.
Where were you going with that? What's the nature of your question?
What considerations were made to have enough flow to make sure that line doesn't back
I
up?
mean,
Because
we're-
if you
We're
do,
suggesting they delay it to phase 2.
no, I'm not making, I'm just asking if somebody's considered things
Yeah.
like that, that's all.
No, it's a good
Right,
question.
that's
and it's
just-
the
and that's
nature of the
only
beast.
You know, again, I'd like to have more detail because somebody mentioned 30-inch pipe and it just stuck in my head.
Yeah.
But I have no idea, you know, as far as sizing of the other pipes and some of the flow direction, I think we have most of it figured out, but
Yeah, so
I don't want to look stupid when that old Main Street starts backing up at everybody's house because it doesn't have enough flow.
So just to, and I won't spend a lot of time and happy to spend as much time as you want, you know, what we've done in terms of the flow analysis is we use the town water records and we actually appropriate flow to each individual parcel in the town. So we know for every single parcel where that flow is going to end up. So when we size this pipe, we take into account all the future parcels and the future phases that are going to eventually tie into it, and we have to size it appropriately. But you're right, it is an issue. It's, you know, it's the same thing on 28 West. You know, that's a pretty big pipe. It's a main spine. Until you get the flow from the future phases in, it's going to have that same issue.
What's the size of the main on 28 generally?
So initially, back in the original design, because we had flow coming from this direction across the river, I think we were up to like a 42-inch pipe heading into the pumping station at the drive-in site. Now this is similarly going to be a 30-inch for a short stretch. 24, you know, as it comes down east on 28, it just keeps getting bigger as you're getting more connections coming in. So it starts out at a 12 and then ends up at a 30 by the time you're down at the pumping station, I believe. So a similar situation there. There's just no way to avoid it if you're going to accommodate the future flow.
Yeah, I just see better flows on 28 as opposed to.
Sure,
Main
I
Street.
understand. Yeah, there's more hotels and
Okay,
whatnot.
just
Yeah.
something that's.
Yeah,
like I
that's
said,
fine. No, it's a
I
great
heard that,
question.
it stuck in my head a
Yeah.
little bit. And,
Yeah.
you know, maybe we accelerate some of the upper Bass River.
You have that option again. That's, you know, we've talked about before, the advantage of putting the spine, main spine in all along. It gives you options in terms of what areas you could tie in
Okay,
in the future.
just something to be prepared for, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Great, thanks. So we just have a couple quick slides. Oh, God, thank you. Okay. I stalled long enough. I think that's.
I figured it
Um,
out.
I think Luke covered most of these. So again, the big milestone in terms of the treatment plant was the 30% submittal that was made last week. Includes plan specs. As Lou indicated, we are working feverishly on the OPCC for the construction costs. We know that obviously is a very important issue for the town. We want to make sure we get it right. We have pieces of it. We're starting to review it and go through it, and we'll look to turn that around as soon as possible. There is a review workshop for the plant scheduled on the 14th, which is next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday. That's again to review the recent 30% submittal, walk through some of the cost issues, and get feedback from town staff. There's also been a plan for value engineering session somewhere along the line in December, presumably, based on that 30% set. And that's in coordination with Lou and his team to go through sort of big ticket items that could be potential cost savings for the town in terms of the treatment plant. So that hasn't officially been scheduled yet, but that will happen somewhere in that time frame. And just looking forward, the next submittal for the plant is the 30%, the final 30% design submittal January 4th. So that's once all the comments are received on the original submittal to turn the final back over to the town. On the collection system, again, as Lou said, we made the 60% submittal for contract 2 and 3 last week. Again, working in concert with the treatment plan on the OPCC development and review. The drilling program actually started today. They started out on Old Main Street. Didn't get an update, but I will in terms of how they made out. But that's going to be going on for the next probably month and a half. I know Jeff's already gotten some calls from some interested residents, but you may be hearing or seeing things, hearing things from people or seeing the drill rig out there. And
I think we posted it on the town website.
Correct.
Pretty well get alert last
Did,
week,
yeah.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah, the marking's down the road for a month, right?
Correct.
A month, give or take a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, so we're working with Laurie on having her crews, so they have to go out and mark out the locations of the water mains in the vicinity of the borings so that we don't inadvertently drill through a water main. And then similarly, the drillers have to go dig safe as well, so all the other private utilities get marked out before they can drill. And then the next major milestone for the collection system for contracts 2 and 3 is the 90% design submittal targeted for February 17th. And we're on schedule to make that. Just a couple of quick things, and we already talked about them on the regulatory permitting update. Cape Cod Commission, that got submitted back on November 22nd. And the letter that they just issued indicated that it was currently under review, and then for the purposes of the SR program, was determined to be consistent. And then we also are scheduling a meeting with another call with DEP on the groundwater discharge permit. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
we're
been
waiting to
set
hear
yet.
from them. I was reading an email actually coming in. It
Yeah.
may be scheduled for this Friday afternoon.
Yeah. So as well. Yeah, we just didn't hear back from them, but they had reached out wanting to have another discussion. So we'll continue on that front as well. So that's a quick overview of where we are. Happy to entertain any further questions or.
Mike, when you break out the cost estimates, can you break out things directly attributable to phase 1, 2, and 3? Because as we do betterments, we might have to basically figure out what costs are apportioned to 3 versus 2 versus 1.
For the individual contracts, you mean, Bill,
Well,
or?
for probably the plant. I mean, you're designing it for 3 phases in total. Is there a way to break out the cost of the plant so that we're not charging phase 1 all 3 phases and charging phase 3 all 3 phases?
Just a flow-based,
We would need to proportion
Yeah.
that somehow.
yeah.
We're not gonna have that broken out by phase 1, 2, or 3 in terms of
Well, I
yards
mean,
of concrete, and this and that.
Right, yeah, I wouldn't think you would do it in bricks and mortar, but there must be a way to do it based on flow.
You just have to do it on flow. Once you have the total number, you can look at, yeah.
Right.
Flow would probably be the best.
yeah,
Yeah, because when we break up the betterment, we're gonna have to break out the costs that the betterment are paying for. per
Sure.
phase.
sure.
So,
Yeah, once we get it all compiled, then yeah, it would seem to make sense to use flow if you want to look at different phase contributions. Sure.
I mean, unless there's actual equipment that, but yeah, whatever is necessary, just so that we're not charging phase 3, 1 and 2 and vice versa.
Okay.
The collection system will be a little bit easier, obviously, front door and all that.
Yeah, except,
Pumping station allocation would be.
right. And even as we talked about the 30-inch pipe, you don't need a 30-inch pipe for phase 1.
Right.
You need an 8-inch or a 12-inch pipe. So
So if you use flow for the plan, we can use flow for the pipe size, possibly to allocate, but then pumping stations sometimes serve specific neighborhoods. So they would have to be allocated to that neighborhood.
So in this case, we have 2 pumping stations, one in contract 3 that will specifically serve the South Shore Drive area. So that's
Right.
not serving any area outside
Right.
of phase
So
1.
it'd be
But,
allocated to South Shore Drive betterments.
but the one PS4 on Old Main, as we've talked about earlier, is going to serve a much larger area of future
Right.
phases. So we'd have to look at some sort of a flow allocation. The pipe is a tougher one because we wouldn't specifically have the cost of a smaller pipe for that stretch. And we're putting a cost estimate together for what we designed, which is the bigger pipe. And we can
Right.
look at some ratios. It depends on how accurate you're looking to make it, but we wouldn't have done a separate cost estimate for a smaller pipe that would
No,
only
I
be needed
understand,
phase
right.
1. So we can talk about it once we get there and look at ways that
Alright.
seem reasonable to distribute it between the phases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, I didn't realize. Yeah, I hadn't thought that
Yeah,
far
well,
along that you were gonna look to break it up by phase.
yeah, I think it, you know, the point that is sort of raised here is, you know, we've been, since October when you know, we had that massive sort of cost increase for the overall project, in just recalibrating the whole financial model, it, you know, gets more and more striking that phase one is not a very big phase. And, you know, what would be the implications of incorporating phase 2 and 3 for the purposes of having more customers to divide the cost of the project? That the financial model that sort of I was given initially, I was told that the town had sort of made some decisions that they didn't want to seek to fund this project as a debt exclusion over the property tax, that they wanted to have a more you know, creative financial approach that relied on the betterments. And, you know, there's about 10 different individual financing mechanisms for this project. But if we're looking at phase 2 and 3, I mean, it'd be interesting to calculate what you know, the model looks like for the betterments with just phase 1, and then, you know, recalculate it with phase 2 and 3 in there, and whether you funded phase 2 and 3 immediately or shortly thereafter. I mean, I'd like to see the numbers. I know what they look like for phase 1, but I have a theory that if you put phase 1, 2, and 3 in there, the numbers might look a lot better. I don't know if anyone's done that yet.
We haven't, that I'm aware of. I don't think that was done
No,
as
but
part of
obviously,
it.
the more users
Yeah,
you get online,
right.
the better it's gonna be from a betterment perspective.
Right.
Yeah, no, you might not be able to build them all in the first initial phase. I mean, the contracts are gonna have to be staggered.
Yeah.
But if you made the financing of it based on an apportionment over phase 1, 2, and 3 versus an apportionment of just phase 1, it might, you know, come out a little better.
Because it's buying the treatment plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
spreading.
most communities who have used the betterment model have put the treatment plant on the tax rate, because it's the common good, it's over many years of usage. The betterment is more the pipes and sometimes the big stations.
So that's the big question.
Yeah.
That, I mean, the financial plan that I'd been given, granted, was done before the, you know, a lot of the inflation kicked in, and so there were smaller amounts, and but there was a, you know, a major emphasis that's been made to me from the start that the community would prefer not to put it on the property.
No, they don't prefer. They demand.
Demand.
This will crash and burn in a heartbeat if you try to go back there.
So,
Because when people see the DPW building and the school come on their tax bills, and then you ask them for another $100 million, they're gonna balk.
so just to be clear, that has been my understanding from the start. That's why it's, you know, it's a little dicey with the financing, because what we're trying to do is, you know, create this model that is not on the property tax. So clearly, you know, if you're committed to that route, it benefits to having a slightly larger initial pool to draw on. It's not impossible, you know, otherwise, but what I'm saying at this point is I would like to run the numbers so that we, you know, we're looking at the next step over the horizon, you know, and say that, look, this is the phase 1, but this is phase 1, 2, and 3. So that, you know, even if we move ahead with phase 1 immediately, we know, and everybody knows what to expect. This is going to be phase 2. This is sort of, you know, time frame. These are the types of costs. And to my way of thinking, it's the plant. That's what the problem is the plant is so expensive. Why do you want to make only phase 1 pay for the plant? If you could get some of those costs into phase 2 and 3, right?
Or even through phase 8, well, first 4 phases, I guess, the initial.
Who's going down the same path you are, which is
Where do you draw
between
the line?
having just phase one betterments and having town put it on town tax bills. There are 8 phases to this. Wouldn't you run the numbers for all 8?
Well, here's the thing. You can run the numbers and it would be very helpful for having all 8 phases. But the problem is that the time frame between the
Mhm.
phases is so long that it makes it impractical. So what we're talking about is the initial plan.
Mhm.
We don't have even a cost estimate for the types of plants that we're going to need for phase 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But we know that the plant in phase 1 is designed to serve phase 1, 2, and 3. So you've got a couple of projects here. When you go into phase 4, it's a new project, right? New plant, new everything, new costs, new customers. So, but you can take phase 1, 2, and 3 and say that's project 1. So that's kind of the thought process.
We would need to explain it, and you just explained it.
No, it makes sense. Like I said, when you get to phase 4 and beyond, it's an expansion of the plant. So
Yes, whole
portions of the plant that's going to get built as part of phase 1 would be used for the future
Plant's going to be
phases.
paid for,
But
not the
by the time you
expansion.
get out there, right?
So,
Yeah, I mean,
so
it's
you know, and just
A
like
reasonable approach.
any system, if you already have a plant and you're expanding it,
Yeah.
it's a more economical project. So getting it off the ground is going to be the hardest, but to have the finances totally just on phase 1, it seems like there might be a better way of doing it.
I mean, we have conceptual costs for all the phases and number of users. I mean, so we have, that was all developed as part of the CWMP or the NPC.
So we'd like
Those
to
could be
reach
relooked
out,
at.
our team, Bill, Son and I, and the financial team, we'd like to reach out and make sure that we have, the accurate data on that phase 2 and 3 so that we can run sort of a model alongside the model we're running for phase 1, what it looks like phase 1, 2, and 3, and, see if it's possible to combine the financing for all of them. And you know what? It may be, we're talking about, things crashing and burning and people not supporting them and things of this nature. And maybe if we had more customers that were directly in here, it would create additional support,
It'll be a much bigger number that's going to scare people worse. The other question is, what's the legal problem with charging a betterment to somebody who's not getting something for the betterment?
Well, you wouldn't do that.
Well, you're talking about charging a betterment for three phases that aren't going to get built until year 5 and year 10 if we're lucky.
Well, that's the thing, is you'd move up phase 2 and 3, it wouldn't be 10 years. But even if just take it from a logistical standpoint, right? It's going to take so long to build phase 1. And when you get done with phase 1, you build phase 2.
So
Right.
that's 3 and
You
4 years.
have to carry
Yeah.
that on your books.
You have to
until-
carry it.
until
And
you
there's ways of doing
implement
it, is all I'm saying. Like if you carry it, say 3 years, you can do that.
Kick in when 2 or 3 years down the road, but you're carrying it on your books as that money's.
But you're right about it.
earmarked.
It would make the initial project larger, but not on a per customer basis.
Oh, I get that. I mean, in the perfect world, we'd have every street dug up and we'd get it all done, period, gone.
But to be clear,
But in reality, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
From a logistics
So that's what
standpoint
we're
and
gonna
a
figure out
monetary
is-
standpoint, you can't
Is
do it.
is reality, what works the best?
So if you go from 200 million to 300 million as your first ask, you're in trouble. Just pick a number out of the sky.
There's another issue, if you will, elephant in the room. This winter, people are gonna get hit with utility bills, the likes of which they've never seen. It's just now starting, and by the time we have spring meeting, there's gonna be a lot of pain in the room. I was in the room in 2011, because on the heels of the last session, whatever you wanna call it, the project on the table went down because of the greater economic environment. It's a good project, but people were feeling financial pressure. I think what Kurt is saying, by breaking it into relatively smaller pieces and bringing small piece number 1 forward to the town, get it done, come back a year later, 2, 3, whatever, it's more, if you will, digestible. Also, the case that Dave's been talking about for years, that once a town has a taste, you know, if you will, the fever starts and people.
Of blood, yeah.
Well, people want to be connected. You kind of, but you gotta get your hook in, you gotta get started, if you will. And I don't think Kurt's wrong for suggesting that, you know, if the initial number is too large, and people start saying, hold on, and it's not irrelevant to be talking about the impact of the new school and DPW building. And the name of the game all along has been to simply get it done. Well, I don't want to be doomsaying. I'm an optimistic and a great proponent of this. But if we get up to the, 11:59 and we go down because we put too much on the table at once, and I'm just talking pragmatism. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's probably a good idea to run numbers, but I also think it's a good idea to say, where's the break point?
Right. It's a good point. No, it's a good point. And from my standpoint, my efforts have been really geared towards phase one and phase one alone. But in running the last model, that point came up is that couldn't you lower your unit costs by having more customers in phase one?
I think you can. It's just the doability issue is what I think
Right.
is really on the
Right,
table.
and timeline. So what we'll try to do is, if nothing else, I think we would benefit by being able to fully understand, if we're doing a plant that's going to be good for 3 phases, to contemplate and be able to talk about what the next phase is going to look like and how the people in the phase 2 and 3 will contribute to the plan and how that whole thing works. But we can make it work. This project, I would not say, based on the data that I'm seeing, that it's unfeasible, but you're funding it with betterments. It's a big part of it. So there it is.
And you still have.
Don't come in with, well, we don't want betterments.
But you have too many unknowns in the funding, from what I know. Maybe
Like
you know
what?
better.
Yeah.
You don't know what the grants are out there. You're taking guesses at it. You're assuming 0% financing. There was a comment in those questions and answers about $200 million number that Charlie Baker had put out there, but apparently
There's
no
no 200.
longer.
No, there's no 200.
So where are they? They need to help.
Right.
We need to have more certainty in the money that we expect to be part of the funding.
And just to be clear, the funding formula with the 200, that number, it's 0. Okay.
Right.
You can't do a financial model based on what if the number's hard, I put it in. If it's not hard,
So you have ways.
so we're going without the 200 million.
You can't figure out how to make it work. And I'm not saying the 200, that's just one example, but there's so many, to me, unknowns in the funding that how much cushion can you build in for maybes on that without croaking the local people on the phase 1 user list?
Yeah, we'll have to go
You
through it
only
in more
have, you
detail.
have a very short period of time to figure this out.
Yeah,
Because it's gonna go to town meeting in April or May, whatever the date is. You gotta know probably by the end of January, February sometime exactly what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think, as far as what the numbers are, future grants, I think that we have to be very aggressive. But, right now, we've got some consultants that are wrapping up their analysis on, on the diff, exactly what types of numbers work there. We've got pretty good estimates on it. And we're also, working on the betterment piece. Like I say, there's 8 additional funding sources that, I think we have a pretty good handle on. I do need some help on one item in my financial plan. Was going to be a 25% capital surcharge on the O&M for the plant.
Right.
So what I don't have, and I was wondering if you guys have this or can get it to me, the estimate of the O&M on an annual basis for the billing. So that we'll use that as the basis to calculate if you add a 25% surcharge. But I don't have any data on what the estimate for the O&M billing would be so that we could calculate what that 25% is. That's a number I've got a floating estimate in here, but it's not based on anyone's analysis. So that I need. And that's one of my last pieces. And we'll be able to talk about, the selectmen have asked to talk about finances on December 20. So I think we'll be able to, give them some answers if, and you're right, it's all based on what assumptions that we have available to us today. So unfortunately, I'm not permitted to say that, well, we might get a grant for 50 million.
Right. Oh, I understand. That's
So what we do is we do it without the grant, and this is what it looks like. Now, if we get the grant, which we're gonna, continue to fight for federal money, I think it's unconscionable if we're doing this. But that'll just lower.
But the differences between wish and hope and reality is so big with these numbers that if you have to make the numbers work without them, you got a problem.
Well, I think they're working. We can go through them in more detail. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I wouldn't be alarmed.
I want
but
we need to go ahead with confidence by April town meeting, or else. That's my thing.
Yeah, I like I said, we have hard numbers, and we'll be able to have hard numbers. But
As long as inflation, well, you've already made the statement. I think we all have that. There is no bigger number than what at least for what we're doing right now. We cannot tolerate any more inflation. We need to figure out what it is.
Yeah,
and hopefully with the contingencies that were built into design, that might come out somewhat in our favor. Who knows?
So I got on that O&M piece. If you guys have some data that can help me there, that answers a key question. And another question you might, you SRF experts, be more familiar with is this whole notion of in the regulations that there are those elements for capital forgiveness in SRF. Now, my understanding is our community, as the regulations are currently written, would be eligible for 7.5%, potentially for economic justice and other factors.
Yeah.
But there was some talk about that being higher. But I haven't seen.
Changes on an annual basis depending on how much money they get and depending on your affordability ranking in the state on that given year. So those numbers change annually. And they issue it when they issue the next intended use plan. So we'll probably be coming out the first of the year. That number you're quoting is, I think, this year's.
And is that townwide, or can you limit that to a certain geography in the town? Because the phase one geography has the best demographics for that.
It would be for your project that you've submitted.
Yeah, so Bob, the phase.
So that'll be when those numbers come out in January, we'll know. It'll be associated with that. They'll have an estimate. Because we need that 7.5%. I mean, it'd be great if it was higher, but 7.5% is worth $500,000 to us a year.
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty, I mean, it's real money. So I have that in there. That's one of the fudgy numbers I'm carrying as an estimate. I'm using the current year's 7.5%, but I think that's how you do it.
The other question that's been in my head, is pick a percentage, whether it's 7.5 or 25 or 20. Obviously, the bigger your number going in, that 20% or 7.5% of whatever that number is bigger. But how much can the program tolerate? There's got to be a point where they say, well, your number is this big now. Our 7.5% is now 4%. There's got to be a cap. I would think there's a reality cap that says we only have X number of dollars in our pool to do this with.
Yeah, no, they don't give it to you all in that year. They spread it
spread
out
out
and
through
cash forward over multiple years.
So 30-year note.
So you show up on the next year for that allotment, and that's why they ask for cash flows when you submit the actual applications for each of them. And as you know, you've got multiple contracts that are spaced out. So that will have to be factored into the amount that they give you over that 3 to 4 year period.
So they give, so 3 or 4 years is a long term. forgiveness, or does it happen up front?
Well, that's what they give you, and you're locked into the loan at that first year. But they don't give you 200 million that year.
I get that, but so if your percentage of debt forgiveness is whatever it is going in, does it stay that through?
I believe they lock you in on the year they give you the loan, yes.
But not necessarily forever. Right? Don't they recertify that all the time? So future years could be subject to
Something like
future
that.
certification.
I don't know if they change the principal forgiveness level year to year. I think they lock it in the year they give you the loan, and that's it.
All right,
So
well,
if it
that'd be
went up,
helpful.
You don't go up, but if it went down, you don't go down either. It's what it was that first year. But we'll have to verify that.
Yeah, I would think you'd have to have something like that for budget,
Yeah, that would be helpful.
whether it's good or bad, at least you know what the number is. And of course, in 5 years, hopefully you're going back to do it all over again for the next phase. For better or worse.
So,
Now, how about the free cash? Now, the town's pretty flush with free cash right now, and I haven't heard much discussion, any discussion about taking a substantial amount of that and putting it towards wastewater. I've heard little bits here and there. Anybody have serious thoughts about, well, we have the money, putting it towards this?
well, we just appropriated $1.8 million for our, our pre-funding mechanism. So, there's a lot of pre-funding. We estimate that we're going to have 10 million in just free, pre-funding from free cash and other sources. But like I say, we just took 2 million almost free cash, and we did the same thing last year. I think we're on our third year of that.
But I've heard a number of like $13 million in free cash. And the other thing is, when we talked about a $10 million pre-fund, our construction numbers weren't anywhere near this.
Right.
We're double our construction numbers, give or take. And yet we haven't talked about.
Well, you're not going to float this project on free cash, so you might as well disabuse yourself of that notion right now.
I'm not talking about a permanent basis. I'm talking about to get that pre-fund.
Yeah, I know everyone's nervous about,
coming in.
everybody's nervous about the wastewater, but the wastewater has to be a business. That's to stand on its own. You can't drain the general fund and then go bankrupt as a town because you're scared about the wastewater numbers. So it's a balance. It's a balance. But no, we're not going to fund this project just on free cash because, you got free cash now. Once you spend it, now it's gone. Now you can't even make the school budget. So there's other things that are going on. The school's not going to turn around and say, oh, well, yeah, you guys are doing wastewater, so we're going to stop spending. So it's there's danger to take all of the town's reserves and dump them into one project. You can't do that. It doesn't work.
Saying take them all.
Well, we took
But
2
there are things of
million.
much less importance that seem to be running to the front of the line ahead of this.
Yeah, no.
This is number one. There's a bunch of people with pie in the sky. This is not that. So, time's running short to figure this out. All right. Regulatory permitting update, we kind of touched that already. correct?
Yes.
So,
Nothing else.
nitrogen sensitive regulation response. We have a few different versions of things. My thought on this anyways, is that the letter should go under 3 different titles, one being the selectmen, one being the RAC, and one being either the Board of Health. So Bruce sent out an email today, Bob put out one earlier with kind of his draft of a redraft of the letter to send to DEP. I don't know what anybody in the committee's comments are on.
A couple of us only saw the first draft, but regardless of what is in the letter, can we strategize as to whether we're amplifying each other's letters? We're unifying under one letter? And more importantly, does the REC even have standing to send an independent letter, since we come under the auspices of the selectmen? If they authorize us to do that, I suppose we would. But you wouldn't want to have anything out there that doesn't jive with what the selectmen are doing.
Well, we'll be speaking with them tomorrow night.
Yeah, let me just, generally, Jeff drafted a tremendously helpful
saw it
letter.
this
It
morning.
was awesome. And the selectmen had indicated their tremendous interest in the issue, making comments. I worked with Jeff and we tweaked up the letter, maybe a little bit broader, hard hitting in terms of, stating the individual viewpoints as a community. And I think that our goal, just like Kurt said, is we're under sort of a unified issue here. And we'd like to probably have a single set of comments on behalf of the town.
Mhm.
And the draft letter, I still kept it under Kurt's signature, but like we say, we're going to be meeting with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow. And I'm pretty sure they're interested in co-sponsoring, the letter. And so I think if we wind up with one letter, common message, covers all the points, and if we can get it signed off, I did see your email. If the Board of Health, is interested as well, I think it would be great to have, a common set of concerns. But at this point, if you guys have a lot of different concerns, I'd encourage you. I think it would be fine if the Board of Health wrote their own letter, but we certainly view the correspondence we prepared as representing kind of the town's interests on it. And, I think the practicality of the regulations, the cost implications, the removal of the funding, those are all kind of our critical points.
Again, we only saw the first draft. Second one will be even more elaborate. Tiff, my question is really about signature. So you want to use the rack as the vehicle? I don't think anyone has a problem with that, but you don't want to inadvertently exclude the selectmen.
No, we're sitting down with the selectmen tomorrow, and what I'm inviting you guys to do is kind of have a co-signatory thing. That my understanding is
Multiple
selectmen are
signatures.
very anxious on making the comments. They asked us, they wanted to see a draft. They're very concerned about the issue. They're engaged. So I thought it was awesome. The timing, couldn't have worked out better.
Okay, as a chair, do you need something from us between now and that close of that meeting? Authorize you to sign on behalf of the RAC?
Well, all right, here's a question for Bob. Your Cliff Notes version, what's the difference between your draft and the previous draft?
I
I didn't see a lot. I mean, there's
No,
some different
we
wording.
amplified, I think, and maybe made some broader statements in terms of an overall Cape-wide leadership position. And I was very impressed with Jeff's letter. And, I really didn't have a lot of points that he didn't mention in one way or another. But, we added a little language, and I would say amplified those critical points, really hammered the financing piece and
Time frames.
yeah, and partisan, we've got the public hearing tonight. I don't know who's going to that, but I'll tell you the more I think about this, that these regulations are being rushed, and it's not a good idea. And to absolutely know that you're creating a situation that every community is going to be in violation of the regulations, it seems blatantly unfair and short-sighted, and it almost will force, it's going to work like an administrative consent order for every single town that now we're lawbreakers.
Now, if anybody's read any of the things on Falmouth, I know Mark Forrest has been following some of that.
I think he dropped off.
They've got 10 embayments to worry about watersheds. So for them, it's, do they have to have a designation for each one of those, and how they handle it, who gets left off, if anybody. So I think it's a lot more complicated than DEP has made it sound. They're like, oh, it's really simple. Just file your management plans, and we'll be all happy. And yet, you say, well, what if I got this far? I got 75%, but I didn't get to 80, but whatever the number may be that somebody's looking for. Well, then we can talk about an extension. They're very, they're vague in things, and then
Well, that's reality.
and the whole letter contradicts themselves anyways, because they've told us IAs won't solve the problem by themselves, and yet they're trying to tell you, oh, go put IAs.
The IAs look,
And then if you look at the numbers, like I said,
we're all sophisticated enough to know the IAs are the hammer to this conversation.
yeah.
They're
for no
just
good
gonna beat
reason,
us over the head until we submit to the collection systems. All right, that's the threat. We got it.
And even
We're going ahead with
the,
the collection systems.
the question being about phosphorus in the freshwater ponds. Well, yeah, they have a problem, even though this is based on nitrogen in the saltwater embayments.
We
You can't ignore the
underestimate-
pond problem.
We underestimate our own political clout in this conversation. We are comprised of 50% Cape residents and 50% Massachusetts residents. It's going to affect people in Worcester and Leominster just as much as it's going to affect us here.
Well, they're gonna get to them next
So-
year.
Eventually, our state senators are going to carry our flag, but everybody else's state senators is going to carry our flag too. DP is not going to be imposing these types of mandates too easily. So they're prodding us along and we're moving along and we'll get there. And 15, 20 years from now, when we didn't reach our TDML targets, we'll get another 5-year extension and then another 5-year extension. And as I said before, none of us will be here when that's happening. So neither will they. They'll be
So-
back looking at their own regs and
I don't
saying,
know
what are we
who's-
doing here?
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought Jeff's letter was very good also, but I talked to Jeff today, it might want to be expanded a little bit more on the technical area. I think the finances and the way the town's moving forward was good, but the technical of IAs aren't the answer that we've been going forward, and whether we still would have to keep requiring them, even if, as we're going forward. I mean, that doesn't make any sense for people that are gonna have to put an IA in, depending on what level of projected treatment or estuaries are gonna be. I just think, and I can bring it to the board, unfortunately, the Board of Health, we've had a member, Mary's been on this, and we've got some updates as we've gone and go, and Jay and I have been for the last several meetings, but to try to tie something into the Board of Health to get a comment by the 16th will be challenging, because we have a meeting tonight, but they have another meeting and probably with consultants to get us an update of where we are. I think will be difficult by the 16th. We can at least have something prepared if needed. I think you're right that probably DEP is going to extend that December 16th date because they're getting so much feedback from other towns and other listening sessions they've had. That was a great summary that you put together for us. I think now all the residents are understanding what a cost would be to them, just not Yarmouth residents, whether you're in or not. It's just to put an IA in it. And they're saying it's 20 to 30,000, which I think is low. And that's not the overall operating cost, electricity costs that they're going to see. And DEP hasn't broken down those numbers yet. And that was one of the questions is they asked DEP, what's the performance standard on these? So we know what it's going to get down to a level for the treatment, how long is it going to take and what the cost is. And DEP says we're looking at still reviewing that further. So they don't have a lot of clear answers from my reading through the first draft and questions after this listening session.
Do we still have a per lot cost in this system? It used to be quoted at 29,000 years ago. I imagine that's probably gone out the window.
For your current system?
For this
Just yeah,
project?
well, whether it be for what we proposed, probably this would probably be a terrible number because we have not a lot of users, but we're doing extra work for the extra phases. But at one point for the whole project, I think it was in the 20s or something.
Yeah. So it
It's
is
in that range. I don't remember the exact cost now, because we've been doing it by phases and stuff, and that, has the big pipe and the treatment plant and all that, so. But it's in that range.
If you just take the big number and divide it by 12,000.
Yeah.
Okay, you're 25,000.
But for a lot of people, you say, okay, look, we take this for the same money or maybe a little bit more, we take this problem off your property, you don't have to deal with it. That, for some people, that's worth it, just not to have the headache. But just
For
my
the
experience.
businesses, absolutely.
Especially them, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to be in the wastewater business.
Because I used to have customers that said, I pick up the phone, I got a problem. I hang up the phone, it's your problem. You're gonna take care of it. I don't think about it anymore. That's a lot. There's a lot of people that work like that.
We can't be that flippant about it because
No, but it's true. And
$10,000,
it's worth-
$20,000 up front, another $1,000 or $2,000 a year forever. It's a lot of money.
I know.
It's another tax bill. It's another 6-month tax bill for some people. So Our real concern at the moment is how do we address DEP's request to us if these regulations can we abide by? And our answer is basically not as they're currently written. So that's what our letter should say. They're holding in their back pocket all these other tools that they can use. They're asking us to look at IAs, they're looking at us to come up with sewer projects. They can always impose it in a moratorium tomorrow morning if they wanted to and say no more hookups till you guys figure this out. That's phase one. Phase two is they start taking away connections that exist.
You know, well,
They haven't
could,
said
but they
that
probably won't.
publicly, right? So they're not willing to, I don't think these types of regulations are that hard ass. They just got to pick a number and put down a piece of paper. And right now it's 20 years and it's a permit and Falmouth has to get 10 permits. All right. What, am I missing something? What's the problem? They laid it out for us and we decided to
Well, I
play.
think there's the reality check.
Our
that-
goal, I think, is to be first to the finish line. If our project gets built faster than anybody else and we get there first, it gets that much cheaper. We're able to do it that much more competitively.
That's my sense of urgency in this is.
That's where we
as
save
we're
our
getting killed
money.
in inflation right now. If we wait a year or 2 or 3 more, we're dead. Because everybody else is gonna be stand in the same line, looking for the same contractors to get the work done.
I mean, we've said this at our listening sessions, the faster we get to doing this project, the cheaper it will be. You just can't sit around and wait.
For me, it's critical that we start this thing next year.
Well, the bottom line is DEP with these regulations is trying to just move communities to implement their wastewater programs. They're not pushing IA systems.
No.
And that's why
That's
the
just their
vagueness
answer.
in all that.
The vagueness of the responses.
They're trying to get communities to move forward and implement their solutions that have been put forth in their CWMPs. And the 20-year timeframe came in from discussions with CLF. That's the bottom line. These regulations are going forward, so that's why the focus on the comments is on what you might be able to get them to revise, not every little detail that you want to contest. Everybody can come up with 10 comments, but you need to focus on what you think the big ones are that they might budge on for your community.
So my suggestion is, if the committee would like the letter to go out under my signature as a chair, we can do that. If you don't, then we won't. And again, that would also be with the blessing of the selectmen tomorrow.
I think if selectmen are willing to have your signature next to theirs, that would be great. It showed the collaboration. Everybody's on the same page.
Well, that's kind of my point. That's why I think even the Board of Health should, if they don't have time to draft their own, they should put their signature on it too. And maybe there's a second letter that
I
goes
think
out,
Board of
too.
Health letters are standalone. They probably carry weight unto themselves. And if you submit on the 17th of December, I don't think they'll throw it out. Just make it before Christmas.
Yeah, I don't mind having another letter. I think that's great. I think that's great. And
Because the points that Bruce has in his email is
Just make sure you CC the state reps and state senators on that letter. So.
including your new state rep. But the other thing is, I think, an incoming state rep should be on that list also.
Well, yeah,
He's
he's
there
not,
yet, but he will be.
I'm gonna meet with him personally and hand over a copy to him. I didn't wanna,
Well, that works too.
disrespect our
Sitting-
legislative
yeah, no, I get
delegation,
that.
but I am meeting with Christopher and we're gonna start talking about this stuff this week.
Did you need a resolution, anything, or vote of support?
If you like to make a motion, fine. If you don't want to, that's fine too.
I'm good with your judgment. Whatever you guys decide.
After knowing me this many years. All right, if you're all okay with
They
it,
have
that's,
not taken back our diplomas.
as long as the selectmen are okay with it. then we'll go.
Yeah, and we kept your name on the draft we sent to selectmen, just to show leadership of the committee and
Well, we're
and
supposed
how
to
we,
be, right, feeding them. So,
yeah, so I thought that was important.
all right. I guess that's, so. RAP neighborhood meetings.
We've had the three to date. The last one was even smaller. I forget there was something weird about that evening. Did it rain?
Thanksgiving week.
It was just smaller.
Well, I think the senior center wanted to have kind of their own meeting
So,
too, kind
I
of
think
cut down.
Our marketing of it fell off after the second one. not for lack of outreach, probably fewer people participated, but even the couple of people that showed up were extremely interested. They spent an hour, they got as much information as they could handle. They're now become ambassadors of the project. They're not, it wasn't a wasted effort by any means. I think if we're going to do the last one, we should do the last one. It's in a more, it's in a different environment. It's not for the users per se, because we're targeting Yarmouthport. It's for the folks who would otherwise have issues with the project if it ended up on the tax rolls, or if the financing got out of hand and the town had to step in. So they're just as much a part of the equation here as the rest of the town. I would suggest that we would maybe do a little marketing. For example, a PR, a press release, something that gets the word out a little better, and maybe personally invite media to attend. So it becomes almost a briefing for the media as much as anybody else who wants to come. But I'm happy to do it. I'd love to answer those kind of questions that come up at these kind of meetings with the support of the guys, the other staff members, or excuse me, the other committee members who show up, and the long-suffering DPW director who's been to all of them.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
So I think they're very useful.
I think we should, well, one of us should mention it tomorrow's night selectmen's meeting, that there is another one scheduled.
Which
That's a cheap outlet to get the information.
I mean, it's on our website and whatnot, but there was an email list that Kyle was using before for the first two that may still be available to blast this one out to as
When's the
well.
Yeah,
next
constant contact. We have that. stuff.
Monday morning, I mean, 2 weeks from today, the 19th,
19th, I think.
5 o'clock at the fire department, the fire station on Route 6A. And we don't expect 100 people. You get 20, you've really made.
A couple dozen was a good number. That first meeting I liked having.
Right, and I think it was a first and everyone wanted to see what it was about. And the weather was conducive. By the way, it's after dark at 4:30, so it's a bit of a challenge to get some folks to come out. But what we did discover at the senior center was that they would like to hold their own session for their 3,000 seniors in February, which is almost ideal because it's a run up to the town meeting. And in essence, there'll be a fifth meeting in February if we all want to take advantage of that, which they will market to their members.
Laura, could you note that Lee Rowley's in the meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
The general sense, though, is that this has not been a place for opposition.
Kind of hoped it would be, so they answered that.
You said exactly that in the meeting. I said, I'm surprised we haven't had any pitchforks in the meeting. And Kurt said, I wish we did, so we knew where they were coming from. So we could deal with it, but
I think unfortunately what happens, everybody says their comments at town meeting. We have these pre-meetings at town hall and only one or two show up after Doug says, and nobody says anything, and then we go to town meeting, everybody,
It's better, more drama there.
the drama and what are all the questions.
Yeah. Well, we're trying, that's all I could say. Maybe in the spring we'll do a couple more, just because as people pay attention to the town meeting, maybe get some more interest out of it.
there is an effect as well that tells the community you are listening to them by making yourself available. They don't come, they can't blame you for not trying. I mean, you didn't ask me my opinion. Yeah, we did. We came to your neighborhood. We invited you. You didn't come, so.
Okay. Friends Ambassador update.
Thank you.
I think you got some money. Huh?
Things travel quickly. Wanted to update the on the progress we are making towards being ready for phase one of construction. I'm pretty excited about this. We have completed boring at the site, and because of a grant that I received on Friday from Mass DER for $165,000, we'll be proceeding with Ty and Bond Engineering Company to get very close to the finish line for design of we're replacing a 6-foot wide culvert with a 60-foot wide bridge. This will extremely improve the water quality in the upper Bass River Mill Pond, which MEP claims we need a 73% reduction in nitrogen. So it will be a significant step forward with water quality improvements. So we're excited about that.
And what about Weir Road?
Weir Road is part of Friends of Bass River's application to the MRCPC to pay for the replacement design of the Weir Road culvert, which is completely collapsed. It's been collapsed for a very long time. Before Jeff arrived, I think the town used to solve the collapse problem by adding more asphalt. The asphalt is 18 inches thick right there. So. And I know Jeff would never do that. So that's clearly on our radar, as well as a significant portion of the permitting challenge that we would have for the wetlands restoration. So we're moving along quite well and on schedule.
So would you move that culvert forward with or without the restoration part of it? To start, at least get that culvert fixed?
I would
know you want to do the
I
whole
would say
thing.
yes, because it's collapsing.
Yeah.
It's stopped any water from getting through there. So yes.
Because I know there's some flow, I noticed there's some flow there in that creek, but not much.
We've
Dry times, you see a lot of dry bottom.
We've had water recording devices there for 2.5 years now. So we have a pretty good database on that.
That's good. Does that give you a sense of where there might be construction, or is it still design?
We're still in design from where we moved
Not
ahead.
where, I'm sorry, I go back to Crab Creek, if you have to grant for that,
Yes.
you expect construction.
We've been in contact with both NRCS and NOAA over the past 6 months, Bob, was it, in our meetings? And they're very interested in the project. That's about all I can say.
Well, it's moving forward, which is good.
It is indeed.
The sooner the better, obviously.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a set of meeting minutes that were sent out. Everybody read them?
I got a couple extra copies here, not enough for everyone, if you need them.
I should voice my opinion that I think shorter, sweeter is better. So we wrote these to be commended.
Oh,
Motion
goodness.
to accept.
Second, motion to accept. All right. Any comments on Zoom?
I'm sure.
Nope.
Okay. All right, we'll do a roll call to approve the minutes. Mary,
Approved?
Lee, you give us a thumbs up if you want. Okay. John, Spiro,
Aye.
and myself. All right, future meeting dates, agenda. Guess we're moving to next year,
I think the first Monday in January
the second.
is a
Is that kind of
day
still
off
a-
or holiday or
I was
whatever.
gonna say still-
Recognized holiday, I guess
Is
you would
that the
say.
hangover?
Yeah.
So do we want to meet on the second? Do we have anything to talk, do you think?
There is no less than 3 bowl games on the second.
Really? There you go. So would anybody object to tentatively going on the 9th? Yeah, we'll do the 9th. correct?
The 9th.
Yes, the 9th. We'll start with that. If we need to change it, we can. Is that all right?
23.
Yes. Okay. Do we have anything else that I missed? A motion to adjourn. Move. Second.
Second. I was thinking of. Go ahead, take your
Go
vote.
ahead. No, if you want to not.
No, it has nothing to do with this issue.
Oh, okay. Mary?
Aye.
Okay to adjourn? Lee? Yeah, that'd be easier. John, Sparrow, myself.
Anybody
you.
jumping online for this DEP meeting?
I'm going.
You can go?
I was gonna
It's at the
go.
Barnstable Town Hall.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah.
I just thought this would probably turn
I'm
into
at
it would turn to a 4-hour meeting if we did that and this.
No, it's disjointed now anyways, because it doesn't start till 6.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I tuned into the one that they had in Lakeville last Wednesday, and I think they had 22 people speak, of which 20 of them were residents complaining about having to put an IA system in. And two were watershed associations speaking in favor of moving forward with the regulations.
Just out of curiosity, is that because Lakeville's not pursuing a sewer system?
No, they held it at the Lakeville office.
I'm sorry, they're resident, the town they come
Most
from?
of the people who attended were from Westport and,
Marion maybe or something like that.
Dartmouth, who were complaining that, hey, these regulations are meant for the Cape, they don't
Of
apply.
course.
We
They're
don't
rich
need
down there.
IA.
That's right, they can afford it.
Blah, blah, blah.
I think
how
that's
that
why we're
works.
wasting the power.
No, it just, I would think a town that's not contemplating doing a sewer system has to default to the IA regulation, part of the regulations, right? So that's what scares me.
Well, there was a woman from Bourne, and they're still in the process of developing their CWMP, and she said, you know, they've been looking at some of their watersheds as doing IA systems, so they're trying to figure out how that impacted this.
Yeah, that's in the CWMP. Maybe we should change ours.
You know, I mean, my thing wasn't that I was against IAs, except that we've been told for how many years they won't work. They won't remove enough nitrogen to work. So why would you force people to do that? That's been my issue. I mean, I'm also the school that if you capture as much waste flow as you can, then you can hit, as technologies develop, you can handle other pollutants. Where if you just do an IA system for 30 grand, and all you're worrying about is nitrogen, what happens to anything else in it that's going through your septic system? There's no way to control it.
Seems irresponsible,
In a way it does.
Yeah.
you know, because it's completely opposite of everything we've been working with them so hard on. You know, it's just a hard left turn that really leaves us in the lurch. I mean, I honestly don't see really the benefit, you know, individual homeowners saying, oh, yeah, we better do the wastewater because if you don't, you know, and they're gonna make me do that. I don't like that kind of thing.
No, I don't either, but I think, again, even 11 years ago, we said they're coming, whether it be CLF or DEP, and everybody's poo-pooed us for a fraction of the money now. And here we are in 2022 and 23, and they're all knocking on the door. And, you know, and again, it may not change a thing, because if we file our permit, our plans with the DEP, we're just gonna keep on the same road we're going down now.
That's why I said earlier.
Yeah, I know you did.
I'm just gonna play by
I
the
also
rules.
believe that's the reality of
What
it.
are we gonna do, sue us?
Doesn't make our jobs easier, but
No.
you know, we can't slow anything down, so let's roll.
We just gotta find 2 new houses for certain residents in this town, outside of the town. We'll do good stuff.
I'm gonna
Right, you
flip
should end
ends
the meeting
now.
now.
Thank you.